Hey guys, welcome back to round 10 of the Batumi Chess Olympiad. And boy, are we in for a treat. On table 1, China versus Poland. And on board 1, Ding Liren versus Jan-Krzysztof Duda. And the game didn't fail to disappoint at all. So Ding Liren with the white pieces and Jan-Krzysztof Duda had black. So let's do this. Ding opens with d4, we have knight f6, c4, e6, the Indian defense, knight f3, d5, transposing to the queen's gambit decline, knight to c3, and here Duda plays d takes c4, and e4 from Ding Liren, so gaining space in the center and also preparing to play bishop takes c4. b5 from Duda. This defends the pawn on c4, and if white plays knight takes b5, then he loses an important pawn on e4. So here e5 from Ding, we have knight to d5, knight takes b5, and here knight to b6, protecting the pawn on c4. Bishop to e2 from Ding, knight to c6, white castles, bishop to e7, queen to d2 from Ding. So this looks like a strange move, blocking in your own bishop. But Ding wants to bring the queen over to kingside via f4 and g4. And well, this bishop really doesn't need to develop for the moment because on c1 it does a great job of guarding the b2 pawn in case black ever transfers the rook to b8. And also this bishop isn't exactly passive on c1. It can, well, it has potential maybe to come to h6 when the queen goes to g4. So here black castles, we have queen to f4, rook to b8, knight c3 from Ding, and here f5. This stops the queen from going to g4, and black would love white to play e takes f6 en passant because then black would have the open f file for his rook. So here queen to g3 from Ding, with the threat of bishop to h6. So here if black decides to grab the pawn on d4, then after knight takes d4, queen takes d4, bishop to h6, and black is in trouble. If rook to f7, defending the mate threat on g7, then bishop to h5, and if g6, you can play bishop takes g6. Black would have to play queen g4, and after bishop takes f7, king takes f7, queen takes g4, pawn takes g4. Here white is simply up the exchange. So for example, if you after bishop takes g6 you play h takes g6, then simply queen takes g6, king to h8, queen takes f7. So now white is threatening mates on g7 and also this bishop is hanging. So after queen to g3, king to h8 from Duda. So now bishop to h6 can be met with pawn takes h6. We have rook to d1 from Ding. And here knight to b4 from Duda. So this opens up the long diagonal for the bishop on c8. And also this knight can go to many squares. d5, it can come to d3 trying to win one of the bishops. It can also come to c2 to harass the rook on a1. b3 from Ding. So after c takes b3, a takes b3, now white has the open a file for his rook. Here a6 from Duda, he doesn't want to lose the pawn on a7, and bishop to c4 from Ding. So this puts pressure on the e6 pawn, discouraging black from going bishop to b7. And if knight takes c4 after b takes c4, white has very nice central control with these pawns. And if bishop to b7, controlling the d5 square, discouraging white from going d5, then here something like knight to e2. Very positional idea, trying to get the knight to f4 because now this pawn is unguarded. And then probably something like h4, so black will find it very difficult to dislodge this knight on f4. So after bishop to c4, we have knight to c2 from Duda, rook to a2, knight to b4, rook to a1, so Duda tries to repeat moves. Rook to a2, knight b4, but here Ding Liren goes rook to e2, so signaling that he doesn't want to play for a draw. Duda plays a5, so making this square available for the bishop. So if let's say h3 from white, which does nothing, then black's idea is knight takes c4, and after b takes c4, bishop to a6 puts a lot of pressure on c4. So here after a5, Ding Liren breaks with d5. With hindsight, black should probably take this pawn with the knight. So after knight d5, knight takes d5. This position is easier to play compared to what happened in the game. So in the game after d5, Duda plays e takes d5, and Ding Liren plays e6. With this move, white locks the bishop on c8 out of the game. The pawn also controls some important squares, so this knight will find it difficult to come back to the defense. And also now the square on e5 is available for a white piece, let's say a knight or a queen. So black has to watch out for ideas now like knight coming to f7. So here rook to f6 seems like a very logical move, just trying to get rid of this pawn on e6. But Duda plays bishop to d6, also a logical move, because after the queen moves, which is what happened in the game, then now queen to f6 with a double attack on this pawn and the knight. And here instead of playing queen to h3, Ding could have played the move bishop to f4. So if the bishop is taken, then here e7 is very strong. This simply wins material for white. So if bishop takes e7, then the queen hangs. So here if queen to e8, then after you take the rook, then you take the bishop with the rook. And after pawn takes, bishop takes d6, forks the queen and the rook. So after bishop f4, if bishop takes f4, queen takes f4, so now the threat is e7. After queen to e7, white can go knight takes d5, knight takes d5. So this enters into a position where white has a lot of pressure because of this pawn on e6. So if black tries to eliminate this pawn with bishop takes e6, then he walks right into a pin. And so, something like queen to e3 is tremendous for white, with moves like rook to e5 and knight to d4 coming. So here if black plays rook takes b3, then you go rook takes f5. Well, here if rook takes f5, then simply queen takes f5, and white has threats of queen to f7. After something like rook, you give a check, you can block with knight to e1, then something like rook to f6. Then you can take on f6, and here if queen takes, then e7 is very strong, so black would have to play pawn takes, and this is a very pleasant position for white to play. But okay, that didn't happen. After bishop d6, we have queen to h3 from Ding, queen to f6 from Duda, so as I said earlier, this attacks the pawn on e6, and also the knight on c3. So here Ding plays knight to b5, Duda takes the bishop, we have knight takes d6, pawn takes d6, and here, despite being down a piece, Ding Liren has good compensation because of this very strong pawn on e6, and also white has nice kingside pressure. So here e7, rook to e8, and knight to g5, so threatening mate on h7. And here h6 would be a terrible move to play for black because simply queen to h5, attacking this rook. So if that is defended with bishop to d7, then white goes rook takes d6. So here if queen to c3, then black simply gets mated. So after rook takes d6, if black takes the queen, then here knight to f7 is a big fork. So after knight g5, Duda defends with queen to g6. And here rook takes d6 from Ding. So this cannot be taken because white simply gives checkmate on h7. So here f4 from Duda. Things are getting very sharp. This opens up an attack on the queen. Queen to h4 from Ding, maintaining an attack on h7. Queen to b1, the queen has to maintain defense of the the h7 pawn, sorry. And here is a calm move from Ding, rook to e1, simply defending this bishop, stopping any backrank checkmates from black. And in this position, bishop d7 is probably the best move, well, the best defense for black, because this stops any rook to d8 ideas from white. But here Ding played bishop to f5. And, Duda played bishop to f5. And Ding Liren immediately took the chance to play rook to d8. Black cannot take the rook because things would end up pretty badly for black. After rook takes, here knight to f7, king g8, and here instead of knight takes, queen to d8 is much stronger. So white gets a winning attack. He simply drives the king up the board. Give a check on d6, and here queen takes f4, threatening mate on g5, and this is tremendous for white. So after rook d8, we have bishop to g6, but things are quite hopeless now for black. After rook takes b8, rook takes b8. Here's queen takes f4, attacking the rook and also threatening queen to f8. So rook to g8 from Duda, knight to f7 check, bishop takes f7, queen takes f7. So now white is threatening to take this rook and queen. So knight d7 from Duda. Duda plays on for a while, but this is simply a hopeless position. After e8 queen, we have knight to f6, and here bishop to g5 with a discovery on the queen, and white is threatening to take the knight. And it was in this position that Jan-Krzysztof Duda resigned the game. With this win, China managed to overcome Poland with a score of 3-1. So that means China joins the lead with the United States with 17 match points, because the US also managed to win their game against Armenia. There are also 3 teams not far behind on 16 match points. They are France, Russia, and Poland. So anything can happen tomorrow. Tomorrow China faces the US, so stay tuned for that one. I hope you enjoyed the game, and until then, see you in the next video.